The RMS Titanic is often romanticized as a symbol of luxury and tragedy, captivating the world with its grand story and heart-wrenching fate. However, beneath its opulent surface lies a collection of unsettling truths and overlooked details. Here are some of the darkest facts about the Titanic that often remain in the shadows. 1. The disregard for ice warnings. Despite receiving multiple ice warnings from other ships, Titanic's crew continued at near full speed. Captain Edward Smith, known for his experience and confidence, faced immense pressure from the ship's owners and passengers to maintain a swift schedule. The Titanic was touted as unsinkable, leading to a false sense of security. Tragically, this negligence in heeding cautionary messages significantly contributed to the ship's fate, resulting in its catastrophic collision with an iceberg. The Titanic received at least 6 warnings about ice in the days leading up to the disaster, yet many were dismissed. The ship was traveling at 22 knots, close to its maximum speed, when it struck the iceberg. Had the crew taken the warning seriously and reduced speed, the tragedy may have been averted. 2. The lifeboat shortage. Titanic carried only 20 lifeboats, which was insufficient for the more than 2,200 passengers and crew aboard. While this number met the legal requirements of the time, it was woefully inadequate for the ship's capacity. The decision to limit lifeboats stemmed from a desire to maximize deck space for first-class passengers and maintain the ship's luxurious appearance. Many lifeboats were launched partially filled, leaving countless individuals behind in the freezing waters of the North Atlantic. Lifeboat 7, for example, was launched with only 28 of its 65-person capacity filled. This short-sightedness and disregard for passenger safety highlighted the hubris that surrounded the Titanic and its supposed invincibility. 3. Class disparities. The evacuation of Titanic was marred by stark class divisions. First-class passengers were prioritized during the lifeboat loading process, while many third-class passengers faced barriers in accessing the decks. The crew's instructions reflected the societal norms of the time, which often placed wealth and status above the value of human life. Many third-class passengers, who were predominantly immigrants seeking a new life in America, were locked in their quarters during the chaos. Some were unaware of the gravity of the situation until it was too late. The tragic reality of this disparity became evident as only about 25% of third-class passengers survived, compared to approximately 60% of first-class passengers. 4. Survivor trauma and stigma. Survivors of the Titanic disaster faced significant psychological trauma and stigma. Many were haunted by survivors' guilt, especially those who had witnessed the suffering of others. Some survivors were also ostracized, with accusations of cowardice or of having acted selfishly to save themselves at the expense of others. The media's portrayal often vilified those who survived, creating a culture of shame. In the years following the disaster, many survivors struggled with the emotional scars left by their experiences. Reports suggest that some suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, unable to shake the memories of the ship sinking and the desperate cries of those left behind. 5. The fate of the ship's dogs. Among the passengers were numerous dogs, many of which belonged to wealthy first-class families. While the ship's owners had implemented a "no animals" policy, these dogs were allowed on board as a privilege of their affluent owners. Tragically, most of these pets did not survive, as they were often left behind in the chaos of evacuation. Only a handful of dogs were reported to have survived, such as a Pomeranian that was rescued by its owner. The heartbreaking fate of the ship's dogs underscores the chaos of the sinking, where even beloved pets were abandoned in the rush for survival. 6. The harrowing conditions of the waters. The water temperature at the time of the sinking was just above freezing, leading to hypothermia setting in within minutes for those who fell overboard. Many of those who entered the water succumbed to the cold long before the lifeboats could return for them. Survivors reported the frigid temperatures were torturous, with bodies soon becoming numb and immobilized. As the night wore on, the scene in the water was horrific. Many witnesses recounted the desperate cries of those struggling to stay afloat, which gradually faded into silence. The tragedy was not only the loss of life but also the sheer brutality of nature faced by those who ended up in the icy depths. 7. The aftermath and legal battles. In the aftermath of the disaster, numerous legal battles ensued between the ship's owners and the families of those lost. Many victims' families received minimal compensation, and the legal proceedings took years, leaving survivors and bereaved families grappling with loss and injustice. The U.S. Senate held hearings to investigate the sinking, and the British inquiry also scrutinized the actions of the crew and owners. However, the outcome left many families feeling abandoned, as the legal frameworks of the time failed to provide adequate accountability or restitution for the losses endured. 8. The myths of heroism. While many stories of bravery emerged from the Titanic disaster, there are also troubling accounts of betrayal and negligence. Some crew members, tasked with helping passengers, chose to save themselves instead. Notable figures, including certain officers, have faced criticism for their actions during the evacuation. The heroic narratives of Captain Smith and other crew members were often emphasized, but the reality was more complex. Some officers reportedly panicked, and there are accounts of lifeboats being launched without fully loading them due to chaos and fear. The contrast between the glorified heroism and the darker realities of human behavior during the crisis adds another layer to the Titanic story. Conclusion. The Titanic tragedy remains a powerful narrative of human ambition and hubris. However, it is essential to acknowledge the darker aspects of this historical event to gain a more comprehensive understanding of the disaster. By examining these overlooked facts, we honor the memory of those who suffered and reflect on the lessons learned from one of history's most infamous maritime disasters. As we remember the Titanic, we must also confront the uncomfortable truths that come with its legacy, recognizing not only the grandeur of the ship but also the profound human cost of its tragic sinking.